Hi, everyone. My name is Andy Catcher. I'm the Communications Director at NOFAS, the National Organization on Fetal Alcohol Syndrome. My role there is I produce and edit various NOFAS videos, including interviews with leading FASD researchers, experts, advocates, and individuals living with an FASD. And this video is going to feature our partnership between NOFAS and NABCA, the National Alcohol Beverage Control Association. And I'm joined here with my colleague, Kathy Mitchell, the Vice President and spokesperson for NOFAS, and Tom Donaldson, the President of NOFAS. They'll be introducing themselves a little later. So just a brief introduction. NABCA is the national association representing the control states, the states and jurisdictions that directly control the sale of alcohol. And NABCA also supports efforts to protect public health and safety from harmful effects that can arise from risky drinking. NOFAS is committed to the prevention of prenatal exposure to alcohol, drugs, and other substances known to harm fetal development, and to supporting individuals, families, and communities living with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, FASDs. So together we've created the FASD Awareness in State Control Agencies, FASA project in 2015, led by NOFAS Vice President and spokesperson Kathy Mitchell here, in collaboration with the NABCA team. And FASA is an initiative to prevent alcohol-exposed pregnancies by increasing FASD educational awareness and resources. And NABCA sponsors the initiative focused on educating medical and allied health professionals and students in Mississippi and Pennsylvania. So now I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Tom Donaldson, who's the NOFAS president, been associated with NOFAS for about 25 years, responsible for formulating and carrying out the NOFAS strategic and business plans, and all the programmatic development and policy initiatives. So I'll turn things over to Tom.
Andy, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, the entire NOFAS team is thrilled to be talking to our partner and our good friend, Steve Schmidt, today. Steve is the Senior Vice President for Public Policy and Communications at NABCA, as Andy said, the National Alcohol Beverage Control Association. Has been a good friend to the organization, been an ally when it comes to raising awareness about the potential harms of risky drinking. And Steve, great to see you.
Thanks a lot, Tom. It's great to see you.
Well, maybe the first question is because perhaps not everyone appreciates exactly what NABCA does. And tell us, what are the control states when it comes to alcohol?
Yeah, Tom, it's not a surprise that most people would not be familiar necessarily with our association. Our association represents those states in the United States that are what we refer to as control states. And what that essentially means for those that are involved in government regulation of beverage alcohol and at the federal and state level is these are the actual states that decided after Prohibition that one of the ways they were going to regulate beverage alcohol, make sure we don't go back to the days of the open saloon and a lot of the problems that occurred, was to say, you know, not only are we going to regulate this product by working with those that manufacture, wholesale, and retail it, make sure there are appropriate outlet density, appropriate pricing, appropriate enforcement activities. But we're going to also say that in these states, we're going to actually be part of the sales and distribution process. And if you think about it, there are some that believe initially that that's schizophrenic. Well, if you begin to think about this product as one that is legal, is appropriate for many people, but is also one that could cause harm, you begin to realize that it's a unique product, that it's a product that, while it has positive aspects for communities and individuals, can have extraordinarily negative and tragic consequences. And of course, you work with many families that have experienced that over the years. So if you combine that understanding about this product, you can begin to see that, you know, having a government agency regulate the product by also being intimately involved in the sales process can be a really effective way to control the potential harm while also balancing consumer interest. So, you know, that's what these states do. They are not just solely the seller of alcohol products, but they are also the regulator. So they are, as I have often referred to it, as kind of the big tent of the beverage alcohol environment in their states. They are involved in those that are making money off the product, as well as having to regulate and enforce the actual laws themselves. So they're unique, but if you begin to really look deeply at these states, you can see that it makes a lot of sense that states would have considered doing this coming out of prohibition.
Well, and I know that as we've forged a relationship over the years, one of your objectives of protecting public health which is so important to us, is what you do. The states that are control states, I mean, is there a benefit or say an advantage in doing public health, public awareness about the potential risks of alcohol, in that you interact with them and they're coordinating?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think it gets to the heart of actually what these agencies are. And in fact, if you go back and look at the enabling legislation for these jurisdictions, for these states across the country, where you will find somewhere in the first few paragraphs that they were created to protect, and often the phrases at that point, it was public health, welfare, and morals. And again, not returning to the days of the abuses that alcohol caused in the late 1800s, early 1900s that led to prohibition. So it is part of the DNA of these states to be actively engaged in working with partners and making sure they inform the public about how the product can be used and where it can cause harm. So it is really the heart of and the definition of these states.
In addition to working with the states, you also work with the distillers, the brewers, suppliers, manufacturers, and on. It seems that that is helpful for them to understand that they just don't have a product to sell, but they have a responsibility or an obligation to ensure that harm is reduced or minimized from their product. And that's also a priority of yours as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's not only a priority for us to be sure that we're interacting with manufacturers and wholesalers and retailers, marketers, advertisers, anybody that has anything to do with the alcohol industry, and making it clear that, look, yes, your product can have some positive attributes, but you need to recognize, acknowledge, and be part of the solution to being sure that you prevent harm from the product. So, and we have a lot of interaction. We talk almost certainly on a weekly, daily, in most cases, basis with someone in the industry in some state. I mean, that is an important business partner of these states that are involved in the process, in the sales process of alcohol. But it also then allows us a unique ability to send a very clear message as an important partner of theirs that, you know what, that's not good enough just to be involved on the sales side of this. You must be involved in the part of the solution to assuring harm does not occur as a result of the use of your product. Unfortunately, that is something that most of the industry is interested in. It's not difficult for us to get them to the table. We may not always agree on the way to do that, but for the most part, we have a good relationship and a good understanding. So in many ways, we bridge or can be an advocate for the public health community and those that have concerns in making sure that their messages get not just to state governments, but to these other valued partners.
You know, I think when a lot of people think of responsible or messages regarding responsible drinking, they think of underage drinking and driving. But Steve, you and NABCA for many, many years, really early on, were one of the first to also talk about prenatal alcohol exposure. And such a big part of our relationship together and the work that we do. How do you, with issues like that, prenatal alcohol exposure and others that are maybe not in the public's consciousness, How do you work with the control states and on the other side, the suppliers and manufacturers, to help them understand that those issues, or an issue like prenatal exposure, is as important as any other?
Well, first and foremost, partnerships like this. We can't be the experts on everything. And we need to reach out. We need to work with organizations like yours in all of the areas where alcohol can cause harm. This also means working with the federal government that's involved in also having a role in informing the public and trying to prevent harm. It means working with academia, with scientists who are studying the effects and potential solutions day to day. So for us, it's being sure, again, that our role is to bring these people together. It's to bring these groups together. And where we can have an effective partnership like this one, rather than our developing messages, our reinventing the wheel, it's important to use the experts. We use one of the phrases we use internally often, and we think it's really important to this issue and to other issues of harm like underage drinking, high-risk college drinking, other harm, drunk driving, other harms, is to use authentic voices. These are the voices that policymakers, that families, that the public expects and needs to hear from in getting the message across. Hearing it from a government official, hearing it from a national trade association, hearing it from the beverage alcohol industry doesn't have the impact, and it sometimes won't have the trust of the public. It won't have the trust of the people you're really trying to reach. So working with the authentic voices, and in this case around this issue, working with NOFAS is a critical part of that strategy. So what we have tried to do is on all these issues, and I've mentioned a few of them already, is to go out and find who are the ones of the trusted voice in the United States and sometimes in states and sometimes in the world on these issues. Those are the people we want to work with. We want to work with the scientists who are studying this. They're the authentic and the voice that needs to be heard by the public and others if we expect them to heed the message and take actions where it needs to be taken.
Such an important point, because those who make drinking a part of their lifestyle could sometimes be resistant to messages that suggest that they ought to take a look at that drinking and make sure they're doing so in a safe way. So how do you overcome that challenge? I think you just described some of the things by being focused on the science and bringing that authentic voice. But that, as a communications expert, that must make it that much more challenging to have a message that can resonate.
Yeah, and again, I do think that again, using that phrase "authentic voices" is really important, because it's not just one voice. It's not just going to be, again, NOFAS. And I think our project's a great example of that. It's physicians, it's nurses, it's people that impact people's lives daily. So what we're going to always, strategically for us, besides making sure that we follow the science, making sure that we work with communications and professionals that work in these specific fields, like, again, NOFAS, is to also be strategic about how we get that message into communities, using, again, who in that community, who is it that resonates with individuals. And again, I think I go back to our project, because we actually believe that in the areas of alcohol-related harm prevention, that these local medical professionals are a critical voice. Just like in impaired and drunk driving, local enforcement, local first responders can be a critical voice. So we really need to identify those individuals, and that's got to be part of our communication strategy.
We've known one another for years, NOFAS and NABCA, and I think what was so exciting was, as you, Steve, and your team, and worked with Kathy Mitchell here at NOFAS, and quickly realized that there was a project that could fill and support both of our missions. I mean, it fits right into what you do, and it's exactly what we have been doing, aligned with so many of the programs that Kathy has developed for the last 20, 25 years. And this program is just that. And again, of course, we're grateful that that NABCA said, we like this program and we want to sponsor it, and you've done so for many years. What is it about this program that, because sometimes you don't have all the resources that you'd like, but you still realize that you can be meaningful and make a difference with the folks that you reach. What is it about this program that either fits in with what NABCA does and is an efficient, effective way to raise awareness?
Well, first of all, let me give credit to your team because, as I said, trying to get your handle around who NABCA in our states are is quite a challenge. And there's and one thing I didn't mention in my opening comments, what makes this additionally more of a challenge, every state is different. The 21st Amendment that repealed prohibition said that we're going to give states, states are going to have the responsibility to decide how they want to regulate this product. So not all states created control systems. Not all states' regulations are the same. Not all states' resources in getting the message out and doing this work is the same. So, one of the early challenges, as I spoke through with your staff and with Kathy, was, okay, let's test this out in a few places. Let's really figure out, how we can do this. How does it resonate best? Initially we thought, well, maybe it's something that needs to come directly as a joint effort, and real quickly what we realized is, as you said, the state, not only doesn't the National Association often have the resources, but the states don't. They also don't have the immediate access and ready access to the authentic voices out in the community. So as we thought about, okay, how can we work with the strengths of both of our organizations to get a project where we know we can make a difference off the ground? And what became obvious was working with, a profession that does exist in every jurisdiction. And by the way, does have an interest in this issue, maybe not at the same level as other states, but was trying to meet the states and meet your resource, meet your contacts, our state contacts, our resources, at a place where they can do some good in an individual state, knowing it's going to be different. This project, working again, with, medical schools, nursing schools, allied health professions, again, that's going to look different from state to state. How many institutions there are, how strong are their associations that are connected? Do they have a task force to look at fetal alcohol spectrum disorders? How active have they been? So kind of using the intelligence that your organization had with the credibility that a state government agency involved in regulating this product brings to the table, that can be a pretty strong partnership. And then to couple that with, okay, where do we meet in that state? What's that mean in that state? And so we have to rely on each other to do a little bit of the background, a little bit of the strategic thinking. And then again, I think NOFAS, who your heroes are in the states. And that at the end of the day is the conduit that this project has gone through. So that's a little bit of thinking how I saw that. Again, I'd like to tell you that Kathy and I and you came up with perfect idea right off the get-go. It took a little bit of searching and thinking through strategically how we were going to do that. And I think we've landed in a good place. And our hope at NABCA is that this is certainly, while this is valuable, that we may see reasons to expand it. We may see reasons to think a little bit differently about it in the future, especially in states where, again, FASD is really an important issue. And there are some states that have identified it as a prime concern of theirs.
Well, we're all for expansion of the program. In a moment, I want to ask Kathy to jump in, but first, one more question, because I know you've been doing this for a while when it comes to messaging. I know that before your role at NABCA, you were the director of the Bureau of Alcohol Education in Pennsylvania, and the way messaging is done and how to reach the public at large and even targeted audiences is much different over the last 2-3 decades. Talk about that, if you would, just, and you touched on it a bit earlier when you talked about how people may be a little bit more reluctant to just listen to a Surgeon General advisory or a government advisory. What are some of the ways that people expect to get their information about messages such as this?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say about my first comment may be what is at maybe that 25 or 30,000 foot level. And what I mean by that is that when I started in this field a few decades ago now, it was really about what you heard a lot about was the way to change behavior, the way to solve this is education, education, education. And in some of the work I did, it was enforcement, enforcement, enforcement. Well, I think that again, I think some really smart scientists and those that understood communication, understood alcohol policy and alcohol communications issues began to realize, you know what, the solution isn't going to be just education. And the solution isn't going to just be enforcement. In other words, the solution is not going to be singly faceted, that you really needed to look at this as a total landscape and environment. And I bring that up because I think as we do our work in the area of public awareness and education, we are going to always have our eye on that big picture. How does it inform the types of support for policies? How does it inform and support other areas of intervention that we need to be addressing to ultimately solve this problem long term? So let me say that first. So our goal isn't just going to be simply to put a lot of information out there and hope that everybody reads it. We want them to act on it. We want there to be support in policies, in the way people talk and think about it. We want to make sure it's consistent with the other things being done to prevent harm out there, whether it's laws, policies, whatever it is. So let me say that first. Because a lot of attention, a lot of money, a lot of resources were spent solely on public awareness at one point in time. And I think we've shifted away from that. We're looking at it more comprehensively and broadly. So I want to say that first. And then when it comes to the communication component, part of this, as I said, part of it is being strategic, knowing what you want to accomplish. It's not just a matter of bringing awareness to an issue. That's very, very, very important. But it's also about, okay, how do we get people to take action? And I think that's the reason why, again, the project we're working on in getting these important community leaders in the medical community is really important, because they can get their patients and their students that are going to be nurses and doctors in the future to start to talk about this during appointments, during certainly their rounds when they're discussing this issue. So that gets to a longer term strategic approach. So I think that's strategic component. The second is knowing where you have to go. And, the days of mass media, certainly while that's still important, I think we also have to recognize the social media. Again, using influencers in that field, in a profession's field, and meeting people where they're at. So those are some, to me, I mean, that's not all that's going to go into it, but those are some really key components that have changed in my mind over the last decades around communicating the kinds of messages that we want to reduce harm.
So Steve, what as you get together with your partners, with NABCA team, your affiliates, the member states, Do you, from time to time, brief them or educate them on issues that you are hearing of or that you are seeing come up? And that could mean, of course, not just from a public health standpoint, but just in the sale and distribution of alcohol products, information that could be important to them.
Yeah, Tom, I probably daily. There are a couple things that are part of my daily routine. The first, I spend about an hour every morning just culling through the news. We have a daily news update ourselves. We certainly have different aggregator services that we look at. It is really important that we stay on top of what is trending, not only things that are macro trends, but sometimes there are challenges that pop up across the country that we need to be on top of and prepared to help our members with. Because again, and it goes back to something I said very early on, this is a complex product. And what might seem like a simple solution somewhere often will have consequences somewhere else that you don't anticipate it. So it's really important for our team to be on top of what's going on literally in the daily news. But also we do look across the country at what's taking place legislatively. And then on top of that, we have a couple really important advisory groups to us. One of those being a public health advisory group that are made up of experts around the country, scientists, academic, organizationally, that track what's taking place. We use them as a resource. We certainly are talking to our members every day. We're fortunate in that we at least have enough of a staff that we can reach out on a daily basis to different groups. So yeah, and then what often happens for me in working with our CEO and our general counsel and others, I'll bring that back to them and we'll sit and talk. Okay, does this change how we're pursuing any of our projects, our efforts, our initiatives? What guidance do we need to give our states? Is there a partner we need to reach out to and talk about this? So yeah, we pride ourselves on trying to be on the pulse of almost everything related to how states have to deal with beverage alcohol on a daily basis.
We see that there are some folks who have, to for lack of a better term, have sort of an adversarial view when they think of what they may call the alcohol industry. Mm-hmm. And then there are those who said earlier enjoy alcohol as part of their lifestyle. And so those two sides could clash from time to time. And one of the areas can be when it comes to regulatory policy, taxation, and things like those kinds of issues. Do you see that? Is that sort of fluid in that it's always changing and different states have a different posture there? Do you advise the states in that area? On balance, do you think folks are comfortable where that is right now and how proceeds that may come from the sale of alcohol are then used to offset what could be some risks?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's a great way to describe it in saying that it can be fluid. It's not only fluid on the issue, but it can be fluid from state to state. It can be different. Often what I've said is because we work on this and we're familiar with so many different groups on a day-to-day basis, there's a real continuum of how people view this product. And we know there will be those groups that believe there should be no restrictions, let the market, be free and let's not have regulation and enforcement involved. There's one end that believes that, and then there's another end that believes that, maybe we should be reconsidering prohibition. There is a continuum of these groups out there. What is really interesting though, is that while there is a real continuum and you need to be aware of what their motivations and principles are. I'm not saying any of them are bad, any of them are good. All I'm saying is, and everybody is entitled to how they approach this issue. but it really is important to think through then strategically, you know, how do you bring groups together when it's appropriate? And how do you just, you know, agree, okay, look, we're going to agree to disagree here. And yes, you two groups are going to agree to disagree. We get that. But let's be respectful. You know, let's still try to achieve something, you know, and there will be times when some win, some lose. The other interesting thing is, and we see this on a weekly basis, you can have odd bedfellows on some projects also and on some initiatives where you would be surprised at where one group agrees with another because of a certain motivation they have, whether it's economically or whether it's from a public health or scientific perspective. And it can be different from issue to issue. So it's fascinating. I have to tell you, it is an interesting field. It's an interesting trying to move people towards common sense solutions. But, you know, I think if you continue to communicate and, you know, certainly stay on top of why people believe what they believe and not immediately assume that they're bad or they're good, that I think gives you a better chance of succeeding on some of these efforts.
Yeah, and I think, Steve, as you say, there seems like there's a science and an art to the work that you do. You've been doing it for a long time, and you know, I can say that I personally learned a lot, and NOFAS has from sort of your lead and some of what you have developed in this arena. So let's talk a little bit, and Kathy, let's pull you in to talk a little bit more about the initiative.
Yeah, so one of the things, thank you so much, Steve, for being available. This is really important. And over the years in working with the various universities and partners that we've pulled in to achieve our goals year to year, it's always interesting to me when I go into states, into control states, that oftentimes the people that I'm meeting with or talking to are not aware that they're even a control state. And I find that really interesting, especially in working with university students. So when we think about, NABCA and kind of why there were control states formed initially and kind of the public health aspect of it to keep their constituents kind of healthy or informed about the potential harms of alcohol. It's interesting to think about, well, one question I would have would be, and I know each state is unique, but when you look at the percentage of sales of alcohol that goes for public health campaigns in control states, how they compare with states that are not control states, number one. But number two, the potential for working with, for instance, university students to actually advocate for some of those monies to go towards things that they see, towards issues that they see as very important and certainly and underfunded. So I know I'm throwing a lot out at you all at once, but so we'll speak to that first, and then I have a few other comments.
Well, let me address your first question, and that is that you've been surprised that there are some in the states that aren't aware they're a control state. That's not really all that surprising. Again, I don't think people think a lot about alcohol regulation and how the product is sold and who controls it. And, there are some states where they're very aware of it. It's typically states that have a very robust retail system like Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Virginia. But there are many states that don't have that same retail system, that may only be wholesale or a smaller footprint in the retail world. So it doesn't affect the consumer that much. So most people aren't going to be aware of it unless you're inside the system. However, I want to note the second, and you talked about it, and that was the resources. Do control systems have more resources than others? And in most cases they do. And here's the reason. One of the other significant values to control systems throughout the country is they are a powerful revenue generator. Think about it this way. In a state like Pennsylvania or Virginia or New Hampshire, they are a key retailer. So they are reaping the benefit of the retail and the wholesale markup of the product. So they are generating revenue beyond taxes for their state. And almost all of these states put some of that money back in to either, direct into maybe the Department of Drug and Alcohol Services, or they put it back into mental health services, or they put it back into communities to help fund law enforcement. There's a lot of different ways that they give that money back to states and localities. And then those that may not specifically identify how you give it back, they go into the general fund. And there are many that say, oh, that's a black hole. Well, at the end of the day, beverage alcohol, because of the harm it causes, because of how we have to enforce the laws, there is a burden on government to control the product. So it is basically, you could argue that it's paying for that you as a citizen that maybe doesn't consume alcohol and has no reason at all to be worried about that, doesn't have to pay a tax to do that. So yes, there are monies that can go back into public health and back into those kinds of initiatives as a result of an agency and of a system that can be a powerful revenue generator.
And I think one of the other aspects that it seems almost like untouched, at least from my perspective, coming from where, purely more of a public health perspective, and trying to really generate enthusiasm and funds to educate people, not to, drink during pregnancy, and that is not a safe product that should be used during pregnancy, but to think about the potential, because I think with both NABCA and NOFAS, we're always interested in policy, always interested in our constituents and advocates, and kind of churning out getting people enthusiastic and kind of in a place where they can actually make a difference. And I think if people really had more knowledge about, when they are in a control state, that there's great potential there for partnerships. And, that got me very excited, actually. Like, this is almost like an untapped resource that people that really want to make a difference can partner, with their states.
Yeah, let me add on to that and maybe define it for those that are watching this podcast. That is that, first of all, they should view their state alcohol regulatory authority as a partner. At the end of the day, especially in controlled jurisdictions, but I think in almost all states, the regulators care about whether or not the product is causing harm. And they can be powerful allies. It's possible, again, in controlled jurisdictions, that they could have resources available to actually help fund some initiatives. But, I also think they can be very powerful policy partners. If there's a policy out there that makes sense to your membership, to your allies, they should be reaching out to the regulator to say, look, be part of that task force, be part of the solution. Most of them will embrace that when, if they have the ability to do that and the resources, and they can have some influence within state government to do that. So it's not only a matter of being able to fund those resources or being part of those resources, but it can also be an important role in helping to frame policy that needs to be framed. For example, some of our states, actually, some of the state regulators have responsibility for some of the signage out there that's done around, FASD. And then the last possible partnership is that, again, remember what I said, that our members especially, but other regulators too, they have a unique relationship. I mean, it's a regulatory relationship most of the time, but it could be a partnership with industry members. And if you're looking to engage them, to get the message out, to be part of the solution, well, you know what? They can open those doors in states where maybe you're not getting into those groups, because again, most of the industry is interested in helping to solve this problem. They want to be part of the solution. They don't want to be the problem. They recognize their product, by virtue of what it is, has the potential for that harm. They understand that. but they certainly want to be part of the solution. So I do think you can use the regulatory, or you can use our members and regulators, and you can use NABCA often as you know, a way of at least getting that introduction or beginning to think about what's the best way to approach it.
Yeah, and I think that there's so much potential there that's untapped, and it's in our world it has been historically very black and white thinking. Either you are for the alcohol industry or you're against, and don't take alcohol money, and a lot of debate around that. And as you know, I'm a person with the lived experience, and we have met with and we have relationships with folks in the alcohol and beverage industry. And I have actually met folks who have spent their lives, you know, in that industry that also have the lived experience of having a child with effects. So again, you know, there is, you know, this is not a black and white thing. And, you know, you go, you know, traveling to Canada, a lot of the public health messaging comes from the breweries there and, you know, the beverage industry. So, you know, I'm glad, you know, I think this conversation is important, and I'm going to just take us back for a minute to our 2020 project, where we worked with the University of Mississippi and in Pennsylvania with Drexel University and I think the Children's Hospital, St. Christopher's Children's Hospital. Oh, St. Christopher's for Children Hospital. But we, you know, a lot of our partners are with folks like the American College of OBGYNs, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and we worked with two of our partners that were both FASD champions in their state. And I think that we made a great impact with the work that we did. And I just wanted to note that over the years, we've talked about what can we do that's going to be sustainable, that we can replicate in every one of the states. And I think we found it, because there's just never enough done to educate medical students and other health students. And with Zoom in 2020, we had big events planned where I was going to go out to Mississippi and an all-day thing. But, you know, this Zoom model is something that we can replicate. And many things have happened since we did our work in Pennsylvania and Mississippi that are a direct result of those events. So it's actually happening, and it's something that's easier to replicate. So anyway, thank you so much. I just wanted to thank you, because you've made a tremendous difference. And I think just having the conversations too about other partners that many of the people in our world never really consider, we should be looking at every partner we can get to really get the message out. So thank you, Steve.
Well, I appreciate the thanks, but I'm not going to let that go unanswered, because we're very pleased to be part of it. But the real thanks on this and so many other issues related to trying to prevent the harm to alcohol are those that, as I said before, whether they had the lived experiences yourself, Kathy, or those that are the authentic voices, they're really, you know, they ultimately are the heroes here. They ultimately are the ones that we should be supporting. And it's also why I am not all that interested in our being the one that's identified out front. I really do think it's got to be those authentic voices that are identified for the public and for other professionals, whether they're in the medical community, law enforcement, in the legislature. That's who they have to hear from. They need to know it's important to them. They need to, you know, and I just think that that is such an important part of this work. And again, for us, we've gotten a lot more out of the partnership than you know, than maybe what it appears. It's just the fact that we can be part of that solution is really important to our members, to our board of directors, and to our staff.
Thank you. Well,
Steve, you know, could I ask you one more question, if you have a moment that I meant to earlier, because I know that NABCA has been around for more than 80 years, I believe. Yep. And you've been doing this for a long time, but I think none of us have seen anything like what we have in the last year with the COVID pandemic. And, I know that, I've been on a couple of meetings recently, which the NABCA data has been cited, and some of the your important information as to alcohol use trends or changes over the last year. What have you seen and how do you respond to any of those changes in this day and age?
Yeah, so I've had a couple of general statements I'd make about it. Number one, as far as sales, alcohol over our history has been recession proof. And we certainly have seen that in the last year. But what I do think gives scientists and medical practitioners and others pause, and it should, is not so much how much more is being consumed, even though it is more, it's how it's being consumed. That's what should give people pause. There is a lot of concern around increases amongst women, which is an issue that's going to be near and dear to your organization. There is concern about the impact of this pandemic on women's mental health, on the consequences, or on the challenges they've had in juggling even more balls the last year or two. I think that has to give people pause. And there are a lot of people that, are addicted to this product. And during the pandemic, they lost their safety net. It was not easy to get to a treatment facility. You couldn't go to AA meetings. There was a lot of support that comes with the way society normally operated before the pandemic, or at least, certainly pre-pandemic and hopefully post, but that went away. So I think what should give people pause is how it's being used. And I don't think we have the answers to that yet. I have seen some data that gives me concern. Everything from, as I mentioned, the pattern of drinking amongst certain populations, increase in some disease related to alcohol, concern in relapse, concern even in things that are affected by alcohol, such as suicide. So I don't think we know the full story, but I am hoping everyone takes a breath, doesn't just listen to the news, takes a look at the science, thinks through, okay, what does this mean for us going forward? And again, I think this is where we're going to have to rely on the scientists and experts such as yourselves to figure out how do we get those support systems back? How do we make sure that we prevent the harm going forward, and hopefully have ameliorated or will any potential harm during the pandemic?
Here. Steve, thank you so much. This is, it's always interesting talking to you. It always has been. And NOFAS is grateful for NABCA and for you and the leadership there in supporting our work, and not just sponsoring the initiative, but talking about this issue and including it in all the discussions that you have with the states and with your partners. So we're very grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Did you have anything you wanted to add in closing? Any final soundbite comment?
Maybe the final thing for me is to say that this, as you said, Tom, it is an important issue to us. It's important to our board of directors, our CEO, who I think both of you know very well, Jim Squio. This was a project that he felt strongly about, and our staff, everybody's on board, and we look forward to the expansion of this work that we're doing now, how it takes root in other states, its successes in Pennsylvania and Mississippi, how that, what that looks like in a year or two, but to play that out. And we look forward to hopefully a long and ongoing relationship.
Wonderful.
Us as well. Thank you so much. And it's great to see you as always.
Yeah. Guys, take care.
Send our best to Jim.
Will.
Absolutely. You look great, Steve. Good to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Take care.